Welcome to my video on the best Terastal for every Ice type Pokemon. Now in this video we will go over the pure Ice type and every dual typing for the Ice typing to assign them the best Terastals and talk through why I think that they are the best Terastal. Now if you want to check out the specific typing, they are down in the description with timestamps, so you can go and check that out to your content. I also want to ask if you could please interact with this video in some way, like, subscribe, comment, any of that kind of stuff. I really appreciate that, because this video has, and this project in its whole, has taken a very long time for me to complete, and it has been a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and a lot of passion, and I really would appreciate kind of any support that anyone would give. But without further ado, let's get started. Just some clarification about this video. First of all, this is not an exhaustive list of every single Terastal that would work well with that typing. It's just ones that, in my opinion, would work best for those specific typings. Also, this does not factor in abilities, so in the trailer we saw that Colossal turned to a water-type Terastal and had its steam engine activated. Now, in some cases, there are going to be abilities that are going to allow for this to be able to take place effectively, and it's going to allow for abilities to be used with regards to the Terastal combination. And when I've talked about the typings here, I have not considered abilities. I will talk about that separately when I do the competitive guide videos in the future. Also, some Pokemon may be suitable to use specific Terastal based on powerful moves that they have. So for example, if a Pokemon has a ground type move such as Earthquake, which is more powerful than Terra Blast, then they could definitely turn to that Terastal to get that stab, to be able to allow that to do more damage. So in some cases where Pokemon have got powerful moves or a wide move pool, they may be suitable to use more variety of Terastal, but again, I have not factored that in with this one, just on the specific typings as a generalization. Here we have the pure Ice type. Now, Ice types do have quite a few weaknesses. They've got a weakness to Fire, they've got a weakness to Steel, they've got a weakness to Rock, and they've also got a weakness to Fighting. Now, 3 of those weaknesses, Fire, Steel, and Rock, can be covered by a ground type Terastal. Also will then take neutral damage from the Fighting type. So ground type Terastal here is definitely going to be the best because it covers the majority of your weaknesses. Now, with regards to other typings, you could also run like a Fairy Terastal, but you are then very risky alongside the Fire type and also the Steel type that could potentially come in. You've got Water type here as well. Water type works really well because it can take not very effective damage from the Steel type. It can hit super effectively on Fire types, super effectively on Rock types, and neutral from Fighting types as well. And I put the Fighting type on here also because it hits the Rock type and the Steel type for super effective damage, whilst taking neutral damage from the others. Now, any of those 3 work really well. I'd say that Ground type Terastal is definitely going to be the best one, but the other 2, Water and Fighting, are definitely really good options to use as well. Here we have the normal and the Ice type Pokemon. Now, there are none currently in the Pokedex at time of recording this, but we have got 3 different Terastal. In fact, I would suggest 5 different Terastals here. You've got the Psychic, you've got the Fairy, and the Flying. Now, Psychic, Fairy, and Flying, they all cover your Fighting type weakness. Obviously, you're 4 times weak to Fighting, so having those would work very well there. You have the Ground typing here as well, and that would allow you just to cover things like Steel types, which would be super effective against you, and also Rock types that would be super effective against you. And then Fighting works in the exact same way. Steel and Rock types that are going to be super effective. And also, Fighting versus Fighting is neutral, Ground versus Fighting is neutral as well, so that would allow for you to take far less damage, because that is obviously 4 times weak to the Fighting type. So definitely Terastal would work fantastically with this Pokemon if this ever begins to exist. Next up, we have got the Bug Ice type, and the Pokemon that we have with this typing is Frosmoth. Now, this is a very unfortunate typing because it does have 2 4 times weaknesses in both Rock and Fire. Now, with those weaknesses, I have just decided to go for these 2 Terastal with Water and Ground typing. Now, Water and Ground type both cover those Rock and Fire type weaknesses and are super effective against both of those Pokemon. Now, you do obviously have the weakness to Flying types as well, which obviously you've got an Ice type here, which should work effectively, and both of those Terastals, they don't resist the Flying type, but they're neutral to the Flying type, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem for you, but just pay attention to the fact that there could be a Flying type come in, potentially against this type. Next up, we have the Dark and Ice type. Now, the big thing here is you have a 4x weakness to fighting type Pokemon. So you do obviously need to be very, very cautious when it comes to those. And I would suggest having a flying or a fairy type as an option here to cover against those fighting type Pokemon. Poison also works well because it covers your fairy type weakness also and resists the fighting type, but flying type, poison type, or not poison type, psychic type or fairy type will hit that super effective fighting type Pokemon that is likely to come out in this case. I've also put water type Pokemon here because fire types are obviously like to come in, as well as rock types, so water can hit hard there. Also, so can the ground type as well. So there's 4 different options there: water or ground, and then flying, fairy, possibly even psychic as well. And bear in mind, you're probably not going to get hit by a ghost type attack or a dark type attack, so the psychic could also work quite nicely in this instance. Next up, we have Dragon Ice, and with this we have the 3 Kyurem forms. I've only put the normal Kyurem form in there, but you have also got Kyurem Blaze and Kyurem Black, or Kyurem Black and Kyurem White. And with this typing, you've got 3 main weaknesses. You have got Fighting or Steel type. You have got the Fairy typing as well, and also you would have Dragon typing as a weakness. So I've put Fairy type Terastal here to cover your Dragon weakness. You could also run Poison or even Steel against this thing. Realistically, Steel would also cover your weakness in terms of possibly Ice as well. It would cover your Fairy type weakness also. You've then got Fighting type, which will come in, so that's why I've put the Flying Terastal here as an opportunity for you to run as well. Now, you have obviously got the Steel weakness in this also, so you could run a Ground type or a Fire type Terastal if you wanted to cover any of that. Next up, we have the Electric Ice Pokemon. Now, there are 2 Pokemon in here. There's Arctozolt and there is also Rotom Frost. So these typings are potentially going to be very interesting. You've got ground type weakness, you've got fighting type weakness, and you've got a fire type weakness. So with regards to covering the ground and the fire type weakness, water definitely works really, really well. It allows you to get rid of the fire type and also the ground type. Now, grass also works for getting rid of the ground type, but it does not work very well against the fire type, so that's one you do need to be cautious about using. And then the ground typing as well could cover the fire type that might be potentially coming in. It could also hit other Pokemon that come in, so the neutral for fighting types as well. You could possibly even run a flying Terastal if you wanted to, but I definitely think that water in this case will probably be the top, and then grass and ground would definitely work in other situations as well. Next up is the Fairy and Ice type. The only Pokemon to hold this typing currently is Alolan Ninetales. Now, it's fantastic typing, but it does have one massive weakness, and that being Steel. Steel is 4 times super effective against this typing. So having a ground or a fighting type Terastal is going to be the best thing you can do. Ground works even better because it's super effective against Poison type, one of your other weaknesses as well. And also a fire type weakness it would work against too. So you've got a massive amount, and even rock type. So actually ground is just like your top tier Terastal 100% because it hits basically all of your weaknesses for super effective damage. You've then got the fighting type, as I said, it covers the steel type, it would also cover the rock type as well. And then you've got the water type, which would cover the fire type and even the rock type damage that you could take. So ground and fighting are going to be your top tier ones. I think ground definitely is going to be the one that's most likely to be used with this, but fighting and water are also an opportunity to use as a Terastal. Next up, we have the fighting and ice type, and the only Pokemon that currently has this typing is Crabominable line. And what we have here is we have weaknesses in Fairy, Psychic, Flying, Fire, Rock, and well, actually, no, we don't have a rock weakness, sorry. So fire would just be the last one there, and also fighting. So what I don't think will happen is I don't think flying types will come in against this one because they're obviously weak to ice types. Meaning that you want to focus on the fairy typing and also the psychic typing. So you could have a ghost or a dark type Terastal if you wanted to, but with the dark, there is a chance of that fairy type coming in. So I'd say focus more on ghost than dark. With regards to the Fairy Terastal, you might want to go for Poison or Steel. However, Steel will work effectively in covering some of the other Pokemon that want to come in, and also give you resistance to things like the Psychic types and also Flying types if they do decide to come in. Now, with regards to the Water type, that allows you to cover any type of Pokemon that particularly would want to come in on this, such as a Fire type, to allow you to obviously get rid of them, same as the Ground type would, but the Water type can kind of give you a different typing, meaning you're going to have a completely different set of resistances and weaknesses on there. So I think in overall, the Ground type is going to be the best, then followed by the Steel type, and then Water type is possibly going to be your third typing there. Next up, we have got Fire and Ice, and the only notable Pokemon here is Galarian Darmanitan Zen mode, which is the only Pokemon that has this typing. I really wish that more Pokemon would have this typing because it is a really fantastic idea to have. Now with this, we have got a weakness to Water, a 4 times weakness to Rock, a weakness to Ground, and a weakness to Fighting. So 4 fairly common typings that are used in the metagame. Now Grass covers 3 of those weaknesses. It covers Rock, Ground, and Water. So Grass typing is definitely a really fantastic Terastal to use in this case. You've also got Water, which covers the Rock, Ground, and resists the Water. And then you've got Psychic, Fairy, or Flying, which would allow for you to cover for the Fighting type weakness. Now the Fighting type weakness, obviously if you want to use a specific Terastal for that one, you can, but I definitely would say my opinion is Grass is the best one in this scenario, followed by Water, followed by Psychic, Fairy, or Flying. Next up, we have got the Flying Ice type. So notable Pokemon here is Articuno. I think that's the only Pokemon that actually does have the Flying and Ice type currently, but I could be wrong with that. Now, with this, you have got a weakness, a 4 times weakness to Rock, you have got a weakness to Fire, you have got a weakness to Steel, and you have also got a weakness to Electricity. Now, what is the best Terastal against all this is the Ground type, because Ground type is super effective against all 4 types of your weakness. So that would mean that you're allowing yourself to essentially deal with any weaknesses that you could have. So Ground is definitely the best Terastal here. But if you need any alternatives, you've got Fighting, which covers the Rock, it covers the Steel type as well, and you've also got the Water, which covers the Rock type, and it covers the Fire type as well. Bear in mind, you have got the Electric type in there, which could cause problems. So definitely, the Terastal that's the best here is Ground, but Fighting and Water can be a good alternative. Next up, we have Ice and Ghost, and the only Pokemon currently sporting this is Frostlass. Now, this is a really cool typing, in my opinion. It does have a few weaknesses. So you have the generic weakness of the Ghost type alongside the Dark type weakness. So, again, I'd recommend using a Dark type Pokemon, which would allow for you to reduce the damage of Ghost type to not very effective. Same with the Dark type being not very effective and having the offensive power against the Ghost type there as well. But you could run the Fairy typing Terastal if you wanted to be super effective against Dark type moves. When it comes to the Ice type, you have got a weakness to Fire, Rock, and Steel type moves. However, those are very effectively covered by Ground type Terastal. So I definitely think that Ground type Terastal in this case would be the best instance, but Fairy and Dark would definitely follow as a secondary one. To be able to deal with all of the other ones quite neutrally. The next one we have is the Grass Ice type. Now, the only Pokemon that has this typing currently is Abomasnow, but in the future we could end up with more, so I'm just going to talk in general about this typing. So Grass Ice, the big immediate notice you have is a Fire type weakness. 4 times Fire type weakness, that is a huge problem for you. You're also weak to things like Bug, you're weak to things like Fighting, you are weak to Flying, which is unlikely to come in because of your Ice type. You are going to be weak to... what's the other one for Grass? Can't think. Ice is going to be neutral, so that's one benefit for there. And then you've got any of the Ice weaknesses on top of that. So as I said, Fighting. You've got Steel weakness as well. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of problems involved with this typing. So with the Grass type, to cover a lot of the weaknesses, typically you want to go for Rock because it's super effective against a lot of the weaknesses, especially things like Fire. I would say your main Terastal focus here is against Fire types because they are the most likely ones to come in, because 4 times effectiveness means that they're likely to get an OHKO. So having the Water type or the Ground typing as well allows you to get super effective damage off on the fire type that could come in, and also changes your typing so you get resistances to a lot of other different typings as well. But I'd say rock is definitely the top one here because it covers most weaknesses, but ground and water are a secondary. Next up, we have got the ground ice type with Mamoswine repping here. This is a typing that actually is really good at covering its own weaknesses. So you're weak to grass, but you can cover that with your ice typing. You're weak to fire, but you can cover that with your ground typing. And you're also weak to steel, but again, in fact, you're not weak to steel, you're neutral to steel, and also to rock. But again, you can cover those with your ground typing as well. The three weaknesses that you do have are grass, which you're unlikely to have Pokemon come in because of the ice typing. You have got the water typing and also the fighting type. So those two types, I would say water and fighting, are the ones that you're most wanting to have a look at. So I've suggested the Terastal or potentially water here. It would allow for you to... also, you've got the fire weakness aspect coming in as well here. So if you go for water, just in case the fire type does come in, you can hit that for super effective damage, and you can nullify some of the effect of the water types that might come in and stay neutral from the fighting. And as I said, it's unlikely for a grass type to come in, so it is risky to play this. Possibly if a grass type does come in, but it's less likely than the water or the fighting type. As the water type is probably the most likely one to come in, I have put the electric Terastal on here. That means that it would hit super effectively against the water typing, and typically we get neutral from the vast majority of the other typings. You're unlikely to have a ground type come in against this, especially with your ice typing naturally being there. So electric typing actually works really, really well as a Terastal, especially to have kind of neutral damage on everything. And also you've got the flying type Terastal, which would allow for you to be able to hit the fighting type super effectively. So if you're wanting to go for more of an offensive aspect, definitely you could go for the water or the flying. If you want to go more defensive with a little bit of offense, you have got the electric Terastal there, which works in your favour. Next up, we have got the ice and poison type. Now, there are currently no poison ice type Pokemon that do exist in the Pokemon world. Hopefully there'll be something that might come out by the time of this recording being released. So ice and poison type have got 5 weaknesses. They've got a weakness to steel, rock and fire from the ice type, and then psychic and ground from the poison typing. Now, I would say that ground type Terastal again is the best option here. So you have got, in terms of the ice type coverage, you're covering the fire type, the rock type and the steel type, all for super effective damage, and then the ground and poison type, not ground and psychic type, sorry, for neutral damage. So ground type Terastal works really, really well here. You have also got the water Terastal here, which hits super effectively against the ground, it hits super effectively against fire, and it hits super effectively against rock, whilst also having neutral damage, not very effective damage, sorry, from the steel and neutral from the psychic. So water also works really, really well. And then I've put the dark type in here. That hits the psychic type for super effective damage and also hits neutral on all of the other weaknesses that you have. So realistically, water and ground are going to be your best Terastal types here, but dark is also a secondary one if you want to take more of a alternating approach to the Terastal, but I would personally go for a ground or water. Next up, we have got the ice and psychic type. Now, unfortunately, this thing does have 6 different weaknesses. You have got fire, rock and steel from the ice typing, and you've also from the psychic typing got dark, ghost and also bug. So there are 6 different typings that you do need to keep an eye out for in this scenario, and I've tried to come up with the best situations you've got here. The ground situation really helps cover your ice type weaknesses because it hits fire, rock and steel all for super effective damage, and it hits neutral on the dark and the ghost types. However, it does hit not very effectively on the bug typing there as well, so that could be a cautionary issue. You've then got the water typing, which I thought works really well because it again hits your fire typing, your rock type for super effective damage. It will hit any of the other typings, so your steel typing for neutral damage, it'll hit ghost, dark and bug for neutral damage, and will take not very effective damage from the steel type as well. So water type does also work quite nicely. And then fairy typing completely changes it up, meaning that you've got super effective mostly against your dark type issue, but you'll also take not very effective damage from the dark type and also the bug type. The ghost type will take neutral damage. Do be cautious obviously because of fire types as well there, so you might want to potentially run a fighting type instead. In fact, fighting type would probably work quite nicely because it would cover quite a few of your weaknesses in the rock, the steel and also the dark weakness, so it covers 3 of your different weaknesses there, but you do have the issue of it not being very effective against bug type and also ghost types being immune to it as well. Now, with regards to this, as I've just covered those ones, I think ground and water would be the best, but fairy or fighting are possible alternatives, but you do have to kind of consider the impacts that potentially could have based on building the rest of your team. Next up, we have got the Ice Rock type. The notable Pokemon here is Aurorus. I think this is the only Pokemon that has got the Ice Rock type. And actually, this is quite interesting with the number of weaknesses that it does have. They also can cover some of its own weaknesses. So with regards to the Ice type, you've got rid of your Fire type weakness by having the Rock typing there. You are still weak to the Rock type. You are still weak to the Steel type on a 4 times effectiveness, so do be very, very cautious of that. You are also going to still be weak to the Fighting type on a 4 times basis as well. So again, you do need to be very, very cautionary with those kind of situations. And then Rock, you have also got the Water weakness and the Ground weakness as well. So a couple of Terastal put together, you can come up with different ones, definitely. A Flying type Terastal, for example, would work quite effectively because it gives you the immunity to ground. It gives you the not very effective damage from the Fighting types, and also takes it down to neutral for the Steel type. But I thought what would work most effectively would probably be the Ground type, and the Ground typing would cover things like your Rock damage, it would cover neutral on the ground, it would cover the Steel type Pokemon, and would also just neutrally hit the majority of your other weaknesses. But bear in mind, obviously things like Water types coming in could be a big problem for you, causing you to take a lot of damage. You could also turn to something like a Fairy type, which allow you to potentially take less damage, but bear in mind, you have got that 4 times Steel damage, so a Steel type Pokemon coming in would wreck that Fairy typing as well. Now, Fighting type does come in and covers a few of your different typings as well. It covers the Steel type for super effective damage. It does cover the obviously Fighting type down to neutral damage. It will then hit the Rock type for super effective damage. It will hit the Ground type for neutral damage, the Water types for neutral damage as well. So a lot of these will be kind of nullified with the Ground and the Fighting Terastal, which is definitely what I would recommend mostly. But the Electric Terastal does also work in covering things like your Water type and taking neutral damage from the majority of the rest. Obviously Ground type is a chance of coming in, so it's not the best Terastal, but it's an option that you can definitely run if you're in a pinch. So I definitely recommend the Fighting or the Ground, but Electric is a secondary option that if you want to use. Next up, we have got the Ice and Steel typing. The typing Pokemon here is Alolan Sandslash. Now this typing does have 2 4 times weaknesses in Fighting as well as Fire, so you do need to be very, very cautious of that. In terms of dealing with the Fire type and not having the issues with the Fighting type aspect, you definitely should go for a Ground or a Water Terastal. Now these would nullify any of the Fire type issues and would allow for you to hit super effectively on that Fire type, and also would take away the Fighting type issue there as well. Now I've also put Psychic and Flying in here. Flying allows for you to get rid of your weakness to ground entirely and give you an immunity, whilst hitting super effectively on the Fighting type and also hitting neutrally on a Fire type. And Psychic does similar, just without giving that immunity to the ground, and allows you to hit super effective on Fighting type, neutral on the Fire type, and also neutral on the ground typing as well. But I would say, realistically, all 3 of those are really good options to use when it comes to Terastal 4 on Ice or Steel. Ice and Steel. Next up, we have got the Ice and Water typing. So on here, we have got Cloyster and Lapras as 2 representatives, but I think there are a few more Pokemon that do fit into this category. Weakness-wise, you have got a weakness to Fighting types as well as Rock types from your Ice type, and then you've got a weakness to Grass types as well as Electric types. Now, with regards to the Rock typing and the Grass typing, your stabs cover super effective on both of those. So they are less likely to come in, but we still need to be cautious because they could still possibly come in. Now, Ground typing allows for you to hit the Rock type and the Electric type for super effective damage, whilst hitting the Fighting type for neutral damage, and the Grass type for not very effective damage. So the Grass type could be super effective against it. As I said, Grass type less likely to come in, so Ground typing is probably going to be your best option here, but at the same time, you could go for an alternative if you are concerned. You've got Fighting type Terastal here, which allows you to hit the Rock type for super effective damage and neutral for any of the other weaknesses, whilst not taking super effective damage from any of those other Pokemon, so that could definitely work really well in your favour if you're wanting to take away a lot of your weaknesses. You've also got the fairy typing here as well. Now the fairy typing will allow you to hit super effectively on the fighting type. You will take neutral from the electric grass, and also the rock typing as well, so that would allow for that to work quite effectively, and fairy typing covers a lot of different Pokemon there as well. So I'd say in this scenario, ground is going to be your best, but you do need to be cautious of the grass type. If not, fighting or fairy work really, really well also. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single view that any of these videos get, and you know, I've put so much time into this that if you made it this way, then all I can do is thank you with my heart, because you know, you're what helps the channel. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. As I said, if you could interact, I'd really appreciate it. Comment down below if there are any ones that you disagree with, or any ones that you would add a different Terastal typing to, and give your reasoning for it as well. And I'd really love to see that. I think that would be a really, really cool way to interact with me, and I will definitely take a look at them, and I'll try and reply as much as I can. But yeah, thank you so much for watching.